Survivor's ready.
If anybody has a hidden immunity idol and you want to play it, now would be the time to do so.
The queen stays queen.
You said rustle feathers.
Did you do that?
Yeah.
I'm supposed to talk to you. We have ripe bananas all the time.
Dude, my prize isn't even $1 million. My prize was that I fell in love in this game. Love at first sight. Her name is Candace.
You officially go down as the dumbest survivor ever.
Welcome to Not Game, All Personal. Hey, we are a Survivor podcast here to talk about all things Survivor, more specifically the events of this past week. I'm Nathan. This is Tony. How's it going,
Hi.
Tony? Another week, another Survivor. We did it.
Another week, another person voted out, another immunity won, another reward won, another. Oh, that's all I got. Hey,
Yeah?
Hey, it was another episode. I wouldn't
yeah.
say it was the most exciting. I feel like we're in another lull right now, but I think it'll heat up pretty soon.
Interesting. See, I don't disagree. I will say I think I enjoyed this episode.
That's
And
fair.
maybe we'll get into more reasons why. I think ultimately I was very excited to see who the person was that was voted out, because I at least thought it was sort of a toss-up, and I think what I was fascinated by is that these were almost two different types of targets, two different types of threats, and I feel like this episode summarized a lot of what's been happening this season, where there is a lot of gameplay from people who are trying to just almost determine what is a threat. That's been the theme. And so this episode was great for me because I just love the mental game talk that took place of is this a bigger threat? Is this a bigger threat? I don't know. Is this a threat? Is this a threat? And so for that aspect, I don't know. I thought that was fun.
I think that's fair. And lull probably isn't the best word. To me, though, as soon as it was down to Gabe and Genevieve as the options, Gabe seemed like such an obvious person that was going to me. Because when ultimately, yes, who's a threat? All of these questions, grand scheme of things is there's 4 Tuku, and if you let them get to 50% Tuku people in the game, they have no reason to work with you at that point. Sue, Caroline, maybe they will to try to get rid of people who are close to their game or blindside somebody, but just purely numbers wise, I feel like it was clear that they were going to take a shot at a Tuku at the end of the day.
Yeah, I definitely think it was the right decision. I think it made sense, just numbers alone, but where most people... Now, I am curious. I'm not sure if this was the right move for everyone.
That's true. Yeah.
But for the most part...
Outside of Tuku, I think there's an argument that it's the best move for them.
Yes, I would agree with that. I think we'll talk about it, but the 2 Tuco that kind of jumped on board, I don't know. That was fascinating.
Yeah.
And it also wasn't even fully necessary. I think the numbers would have been there either way. But nevertheless, I do think the right person was voted out for the majority of people in the game. Yeah.
That's a great point. I paid attention during that time, but if it had just been Tuku plus Rachel, because Rachel was the big one who wanted to push for Genevieve, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Tuku could have just pulled her in and taken out Genevieve, and then they're in a phenomenal spot. So it's interesting that was never considered. But then I guess there were people on Tuku, like Caroline, who wanted to go for Gabe, and so that kind of threw that part off. They wanted to take out one of their own as well, which I think is the correct thing to do threat management wise as a Tuku member. You want to kind of just go with the group to take out one of your own, so that to make sure that it's not you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Kyle is the one I am most curious about, because in my mind, we know he's a threat, at least as far as challenges go, right? He's one away from tying the record from individual immunity challenges in a single season. So that's kind of crazy. He's won everyone except for the last week. So he's clearly a threat. It's talked about every week, and the only reason I think it's not talked about more is because he's winning. I think, if he wasn't winning, it'd be talked about way more, not just from Sue. But
yeah,
for him, I think he should be keeping people like Gabe in the game. you know? And I think like for Caroline, we talked about this a couple weeks ago, but I do think there is this level of like her, Rachel, and Genevieve are all trying to play similar games, and so perhaps leaving Genevieve in the game is good for her because here's someone who's playing my game but is a bigger threat, so she'll probably go before I do.
Mm-hmm.
Kyle, I'm not sure now because who are the eyes going to point to? It's Kyle and then maybe Sam, even though Sam hasn't really won yet. You
Mm-hmm.
know,
Mm-hmm.
I'm just worried for Kyle, and I'm not sure if he fully thought that through.
Yeah, it's an interesting move, and you mentioned this a few weeks ago, where for some reason, like these duos are seeing it like, and maybe you've mentioned even in past seasons of like, this person has played a similar game to me, so I know that we have to take a shot at each other eventually. So I want to be the first one to take that shot. So I'm going to take it at final 9. Like it's a very interesting. Like you don't want to go to the end with the same people. You don't want to have like a close knit person go to the end because you are leaving it up to the jury to decide who drove and whose decisions were there.
Mm-hmm.
But we've seen that a couple times where people are just so willing to cut the people that are close to them for in this new era or these last couple seasons at least.
Yeah. Yeah, it is a fascinating point, and I think it's not an incorrect move to want Gabe out of the game. It just feels a little soon.
Yeah.
And I do worry about Kyle because he hasn't really been vulnerable enough to show that he has that safety net or he has those relationships because he hasn't needed it, right? So I don't know. But again, I was never counting on Kyle to go super far, you know? Like
No.
even every single episode, I never look at him like, oh, he might make it to the final. Like I don't think he's gonna make it to the final tribal, even a little bit.
He and Sue just exist to hate each other. Well, Sue to hate him and Kyle to be Kyle. To be hated.
Yeah,
He exists to be
I don't
hated by
know
Sue.
if he has acknowledged Sue in I like at least not to us, you know?
No, not really. Like maybe early on in Tuku when that was all the talk about, but it seems like he's oblivious to how much he
Uh-huh.
despises him, which can't be true.
Yeah, I will say in Sue's defense, the montage we saw was from I think the entire season up until this point, you know?
Yeah, it was a
So,
lot, but
because like Tiana
still.
showed up, I forget who else. Oh, Rome was there in a clip. So like,
But all of those, I'm pretty sure all of those are clips that were in the show. So it's literally
Mhm.
they took clips so that were all they didn't add anything outside of it. That's literally all stuff that they've showed to us this far. So that's her only story is that she's saying she's younger than she is and she hates Kyle. Like
Yeah,
what do we get from that? I don't know. She's honestly become a disappointment with how like highly I thought she was going to be like an
yeah,
interesting player throughout the game.
yeah. She has been just silenced by like the edit and by
Yeah.
well, and especially because I think like for her and Caroline, like they were a duo from the start,
Mhm.
and I think we all assumed that Sue would kind of be the lead in that duo,
Yeah.
and it has just completely turned. Like
Oh
Caroline
yeah.
is the one now from that tribe who has the largest story, you know, now that Gabe's gone. I mean, like Sue and Gabe had this tight relationship the first couple episodes, and now that
Mhm.
was just kind of it just went away. Like I don't feel like we really got closure with that. You know, obviously she was blindsided and they didn't include her in the vote, but I don't know. It's really been like Caroline, the star of this tribe, and I did not see that coming the first couple episodes.
No, but like I didn't see it coming at the time. I wouldn't have said it, but looking back, I can see how she was kind of yeah, she was very instrumental in part of a lot of those conversations. She just you knew she was going to play this behind the scenes kind of game, so you kind of already viewed her in that behind the scenes kind of role.
Sure. Yeah, no, I think it makes sense. I'm very curious to see how it ends with her because, like I said, just the fact that we got her, Rachel, and Genevieve all still in the game and all still just keeping each other at arm's length. And
Yeah. What
I mean,
so you mentioned that they're playing similar games. How would you describe their games?
I think they are all trying to play the undercover strategist, I would say.
Okay, yeah.
And I think Genevieve just got caught, right? Because
Mhm.
if things wouldn't have been as blown up last week, and I mean, I I was a little glad to see her, um, just some justice done to her game after just
Yeah.
turning on Soul. I don't know. It felt a little good
Yeah.
that Teeny didn't just roll over and kind of let her have it. But I think Genevieve got caught. You know, if it doesn't blow up, she gets away with blindsiding her ally. You know, Caroline, I think that's what Caroline wanted to do, right? Like Caroline's
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I want to do that. I think Rachel hasn't really shown that side of like the devious blind side, but she certainly is much smarter and much quieter of a player, I would say. You know, I think like if there's a spectrum between like comp beast, but all the way to the other side of like social strategist, I would say the three of them kind of fall all the way to the other side of it.
Yeah, I can definitely see it. Like I knew that there was some like I could see similarities, but I couldn't put a name to it. That's why I asked. I was like, what is it, Nathan? What am I missing that makes these three so similar? It's wild that Genevieve made a move that we view, I think both of us viewed last week as a poor move from our perspective at that moment. And still that's the move that puts her on everybody's radar, which makes it an even worse move because now
Mhm.
she's a big target. And yeah, I don't see her making it very deep now just cuz I think she's probably close to next if not next. It depends if Kyle wins immunity, I think.
Yeah. And I think that is like from again, like Caroline's perspective, like why not keep her in the game? Because
Mhm.
if you're just talking in general, like the season of Survivor, you're like, hey, we need to get out the I don't know, like some of these big comp beasts, right? Like the lions, as we've heard it said before. Like
Yep.
or if we're like, hey, we need to get out some of these people that are playing the middle, like that's what we need to, you know, like I think a lot of times they talk in general terms,
Mhm.
and I think you just need to be aware of like which category you fall into, and then make sure that there are people also in that category that are just a bit higher on that list, you know? And
Mhm.
so that's why like I think it was great that she kept her. I think for her and Rachel, I don't see either of them going before Genevieve unless something just like crazy happens. You know, where it's like a big split, there's a blind side elsewhere. You know, but like it's just fascinating that the alliances feel so much more open these past few episodes, where a lot of
Oh
people are
yeah.
voting together and the discussions are so open, and like there's this acknowledgement of like, hey, here are the big targets, let's talk in these little pods, but eventually all come together and decide which one of these big targets we're going to go for now.
Yeah, I think I'd even say like there's maybe one firm voting block in the game at this point, being Caroline and Sue. Everybody else feels
And they didn't
very,
even
very
vote together.
solo. And yeah, and they didn't even vote together, but that's a good point. But everybody feels so like their own motivation is going to make their decision. There's no like group working together.
Yeah.
Obviously, ultimately, the group will come to a consensus because that's just how these games work. But it's not even voting blocks. It's just everybody's voting solo for what they think that they should do based on if they think they have the numbers. And it's very interesting because usually there's a couple duos or trios in there, and there's just nothing. It seems like.
Well, oh, that's so fascinating. Now I'm like looking at the numbers, and essentially, like every original tribe has blindsided their own. Where it
Mm-hmm.
starts off where Andy blindsides Rachel and Sam, then
Mm-hmm.
it gets to Genevieve blindsiding Teeny, and now it's Caroline and Kyle blindsiding Sue. So like, no one has ever like stuck it out and voted together, you know?
Yeah.
So it is just like this individual game. And like granted a lot of them come back together, but like who like Caroline and Sue, like I could see them linking back up, right? Like I don't think this
Yeah.
is gonna be damaging. Teeny and Genevieve, probably not so much.
Yep.
We've seen Sam and Rachel. I really enjoy their dynamic, but like they're not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily in sync, and Andy the same thing. So it's like every single person in this game feels like they're doing their own thing. It just depends on like, do your motives align with this vote with these other people?
Yeah, and genuinely feels like something completely new that we haven't seen ever. And I don't know what it is about this season. I think it's just everybody's ready to cut their closest ally because they think that that's the route to the end. And I wonder, has that happened a lot recently where that becomes the shining like thing that you remember from certain seasons? I think the biggest one is Cody and Jesse. I feel like
Yeah.
that's the big one in the modern era. But there's been 4 seasons since then that we haven't seen this sort of thing, and so it's so interesting that that seems to be the priority. Except for, like you said, Caroline and Sue voted separately, but I do think that they'll come back together and work together. So that's really the driving force that's left in the game.
Well, I will say last season we saw several attempts. There was Kenzie that openly talked about wanting Tiffany out, and then it just happened without her knowledge. And then Maria tried to get Charlie out,
Yeah,
and
that's
that
true. That's true.
backfired. So, because we talked a lot about it last season, as far as like when did this narrative start, and why
Yeah.
are all these people viewing this as the thing to do? And so I don't know what it is, but I think it's happening again, where it's like, hey, I need to like I can't sit at the end with 2 other people from my tribe. I need to be the only one from my tribe, right? Like I
Yeah.
can't, if I'm sitting next to someone that I started the game with, I'm not gonna. And that is a fascinating shift that didn't happen until this modern era.
No, and honestly, that's a phenomenal point. If you had asked me, I wouldn't have been able to pull out the name Charlie, Maria, or Tiffany. Like I thought last season, I was like Kenzie. Yeah, I can't remember anything else, and like moved on, and I was like, yep, Jesse and Cody. That's my example. That's the top of
I
mind one.
remember we had the conversations about this very thing
definitely
last
did.
season.
And that's what made me think of it when looking at like how solo everyone is.
Yeah, it's and I kind of like it. Like it's fun, I think
Yeah.
you brought up last week. Like, is this a good thing that there's been so many, essentially unanimous votes, right? I know like Sue was on the wrong side of the numbers as well as Gabe, but like it felt unanimous, And I don't mind it as long as there is still interesting game happening,
Exactly.
And I think, like I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, I love that there is discussion and debate about what a threat is. That is fascinating to me. Is it Gabe, who has numbers and can win immunity, or is it Genevieve, who is, cold-blooded and ready to cut you and play this middle game? Who's the biggest threat in that situation? And it looks like it might shift week to week. Who knows?
Yeah, I think for so long we viewed unanimous votes as like this is the worst thing in the world. And now no, it's the big alliance that's picking people off that's the big issue. But since we have all of these individuals and conversations about like, okay, who is the bigger threat, even though it's vastly different games, and really seeing multiple valid options. Like I said, going into this vote, I was like, it's probably Gabe just based on the numbers, but they gave us a valid reason as to why Genevieve is also a very, very real option, and also gave us people with the motive to do it. Like I said, the numbers were there to get rid of Genevieve. That's just not the direction the people went. And so that's interesting to see, like, okay, they decided Gabe is the bigger threat here. Let's see if it bites him in the butt.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fun. I definitely like this new kind of direction because I'm just trying to think if we've seen a season like it, and I'm not exactly sure. I think the only one that kind of comes to mind is Second Chances, because I know like the term voting blocks was like a big deal that season. But even then, like you had people that were working together, and I think as of now, like now that Caroline blindsided Sue, like there's really no one that has stuck together at all this season. So
I have some friends that are about to watch Second Chances, and I'm gonna rewatch the whole thing with them, and I'm so excited because Second Chances is great.
I made the mistake when I first started watching Survivor. Okay, this feels stupid saying it out loud.
Oh boy.
I watched them like backwards because I was watching like the current season for the first time, and then I watched the one before, and I just kept doing that. So the Second Chances, I think it was Heroes, Hustlers, Healers. I think.
Okay, cool. 35 with Ben.
Yes, yep, that was the one.
Cool.
So by the time I got to Second Chances, I didn't know any of the people because, well, I knew some of them because they came on for like a third time, but
yeah,
it was just not worth it. Don't do that. Don't do it like that.
Yeah, it wouldn't hit as hard if you don't know the people.
It did not
make sense.
So Try to watch chronologically if you can.
Yeah.
And yes, that's my that's my advice.
I think there's one big player that I want to talk to you about the segment that they had because it feels like Survivor's trying to paint this picture
Mm-hmm.
of Andy being a mastermind, manipulator, spider, everyone's in his web. He's controlling everything. And then he did what felt like nothing this episode to actually make a decision. And so it was just an interesting time to have that shot. And are they sending us a message that genuinely watching it, it's like, okay, could Andy be the winner at the end of this? Like, is this what this is giving us? Is like Andy's gonna win this? Or is it painting him as this
I
big
mean,
villain? Or is he getting maybe a little Rome
I
treatment where he's gonna fly too high?
I literally brought up the same thing 2 weeks ago with the Sierra vote because
Yeah.
the big narrative was, oh, it's my time to flip. I'm gonna flip on my original. And you crunch the numbers, and not only did he not decide the plan, but his vote wasn't even necessary to the plan.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's been the case every week where we see these. Like, I mean, this was a full on like montage of him. And to his credit, like everyone is talking to him.
Yeah.
That is true. Like
I'm not
Caroline,
saying it's inaccurate, but they're sending a message, a clear message, it seems.
yeah, because Caroline went up to him and was like, "Hey, I think I want to go for Gabe tonight." And he was the
Mhm.
one that relayed to everyone, like, "Oh, hey, Caroline's in too." So
Yeah.
I don't know because I would still say that he is not the one calling these shots. He was never
Mhm.
the one that brought up Gabe or Genevieve. He is technically having conversations with everyone, and he's having these confessionals telling us that he's in charge, but like I don't buy it, so I don't know what to make of it. I really don't. The only other thing I can think of is like if he doesn't win, does he just get completely blindsided by at Final Tribal? And I don't know. Like, do we need to see this narrative of him thinking he's this mastermind and then like realizing like, wait, it wasn't me? But that feels
Yeah.
like less likely than a winner's at this point.
And I think that's what scares me more than anything is if there's this narrative that he's controlling everything, but as we're watching, he's definitely not.
Yeah.
But they're showing it and making it seem like he's controlling everything, so that at the end there's a narrative for, yeah, he was controlling stuff all these episodes, and that's why he won. Like you said, he's in a good spot in the game. He is somebody that these people are feeling comfortable enough to talk to, and relaying this information and helping make these moves happen. He's not sitting idly by like Sue. Like Sue is an example of somebody to me who's just kind of sitting around, it seems like. Whereas he's making like he's a part of the moves. But it just seems like such a stretch that he's doing it, but he's so confident, and they're telling us that he's the one that's doing it.
See,
So
I would
it's just an
almost
interesting edit.
I would almost make the argument that you could put Sue in his confessional and it would have the same impact. Like if Sue
Yeah.
sits there and says, I talked to this person, I talked to this person, and now this move's going to happen. Like to me, Sue has just as much to do with it as he does. It's just a
That's a
matter
good
of
point. Yeah.
he's on screen telling us, you know? Like that's how much credit I'm giving it right now.
Yeah. And it sucks because I would kind of want to give him. There's a part of me that's rooting for him a little bit, but there's just so much confidence that genuinely feels a little bit like Rome and just his confidence earlier on. And so it's just fascinating because we had an entire conversation about these different voting blocks and the power players and the people who were making decisions about this episode. And we talked for maybe 20 minutes there. And we did not mention the one person who had a 3-minute segment about how he is a spider and everybody is in his web and he's controlling everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Like the fact that he's so far from the narrative and the decision of this episode, and yet he thinks he's running things, is fascinating.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I won't even say that it's, I don't know, like bad gameplay necessarily, because, like, if he can get to the end and keep a low profile while maintaining conversations with anyone, that's great. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like, I'm not saying he's undeserving to win the game, but if he wins the game based on, I orchestrated all this, that's what's going to disappoint me a little bit, because
Exactly.
I don't think what he's saying is matching his actual gameplay. If he had a confessional and was just like, yeah, I'm doing great socially. I'm having conversations with everyone. I'm doing a great job making sure that like my name is never even an option. That's all
Mhm.
correct. That's
In.
great.
Love it.
So I don't know. I think like this could be disappointing if if the other option happens instead.
Yep, yep. It's just wild to me that he's so outside of the story of this episode.
Yeah, I mean, like when you look at the list of people who like had a play in the move tonight, I would look at almost everyone above him. Obviously, Sue left out of it. That's tough, you know. Like Kyle, Sam, and Rachel, they were the ones that initially kind of started this off, right? Like I
Mhm.
think they get a lot of credit. I think Caroline gets credit for separately coming up with the same idea.
Mhm.
Uh, Genevieve for I don't know being a part of it and also making like it wasn't her even though she was an option. So like
Yeah.
I think she gets more credit than Andy for tonight. I don't know. Like I think I look at every tribal council as like is there something here that you know blank can put on their resume? And I think Sam, Rachel, Genevieve, Teeny, Caroline, Kyle, those are all people that can point to this tribal council and add to their resume in some way.
Mhm. Mhm.
Andy, I think, is below all of those people,
Yeah.
and that's tough.
Yeah. He just is. I think Teeny is probably in a similar situation to me, where I just she's been beaten up so much. I think she just was kind of along for the ride on this one, and that's kind of what you have to do when your closest ally gets voted out. But that's
Yeah.
you just kind of ride with it, and then hopefully you can figure something out the next one. Um, but yeah, it's just wild to see the edit and how it. Not that we talk about edit or and yeah, whatever.
I know what you mean. Like the show is clearly trying to communicate something about Andy, and I don't know if anyone's buying it. I don't know
Yep.
if anyone's looking at it and thinking that. So,
Or maybe we're seeing the stuff we're supposed to be seeing. Like that's always an option too. Like they're trying
uh
to make it seem like he's a little in over his head.
I mean, that's really what I'm hoping for. And that's why I think
Mhm.
the best option of this is that he gets to the end, realizes that's like, oh, maybe my game doesn't match what I've been saying. And I
Mhm.
think then all of this would make sense. But I don't know. Like, can you show some footage of him initiating these moves? That'd be a little
Please?
helpful.
Yeah,
We're
yeah.
begging you. Who else do you have things to say about?
I mean, it's a teeny. I think that was a big part of the early episode and her response to
Mhm.
Genevieve. I think it's cool to see that these people are able to have, and maybe it's a special occasion because it's teeny and everybody loves teeny, but she's able to like have these emotions and be frustrated, and everybody's like, yeah, yeah, you have every right to feel that way. But then she's able to have a conversation and like not patch things up with Genevieve, but clear the air and like at least figure it out and be fine together. I think
Yeah.
that's one of my biggest fears if I were in a season like this is that because of the like just being exhausted and hungry that you'd pop off and then you'd have an issue or you'd say things you regret and it would be a huge issue, but the fact that they're able to just like yeah, you're able to get mad and they're able to just be like, yeah, that doesn't affect the game. I'm not going to use that as a tool. I don't know. I thought that was cool.
Mhm.
And worth mentioning.
Yeah, I would actually say I think Teeny handled this whole situation probably the best you could. I think
Mm-hmm.
there are many times I wish people would get mad. And
Yeah.
I think they're justified in doing so because you did get blindsided by someone you were supposed to be working with. And Genevieve ruined your game like she just did, right? By sending your
Mm-hmm.
number one ally home, you messed up my game. And so I don't know, it bothers me how and it makes sense because it's a social game. So I understand why you have to tiptoe around it and play nice afterwards, but like I kind of like that she let her have it. And I think she did it in a way and said the right things where she even threw out like you try to humiliate me, right? Like you wanted me to look
Yeah.
stupid and be the, you
Yeah.
know? And I think she said the exact right things that made Genevieve a target, you know? Because
Mm-hmm.
I think if you play nice in that moment, everyone just moves on from that. But I think Teeny did it in such a way where nobody was questioning, like, why are you upset? Like, they're like, nope, you should be upset. Genevieve did blindside. You got a point. And so I
Mm-hmm.
don't know. Like, I think that was just brilliant, and I still have hope because I don't think she's going to be on anyone's radar coming up next week, at least.
That's a super good point, and I completely forgot about that. Yeah, the ability to like, she didn't say anything malicious towards Genevieve. She didn't like attack her as a person, which it would be easy to do when you're furious like that. But yeah, she took the route of like, why would you try, like, you're trying to humiliate me, you're trying to make me look stupid and voting against everybody else and like ruining, like you're intentionally trying to hurt my game. Like that's the perfect way to frame it. It makes me think of Devon's when he goes after Ron and Julie, I think, or whatever, and Edge of Extinction. I don't even remember it, but it's like,
Yep, with the fake idol.
is the fake idol, and then he's just like, what, you trying to make me look stupid in front of my kids? Oh yeah, that's right, because you're a villain, and just like burying, like it gives vibes of that where, yeah, paint them as the bad guy. And then you get the sympathy, and even if you're frustrated and you act out a little bit, you get a little grace because, man, yeah, actually, you know what? What Genevieve was rude and was a little bit far.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't got a lot of hope for Genevieve going far, that's for sure.
No,
She really,
she,
I mean, like we said it last week, but this, not a great move.
no, and it's partially because Teeny had the good counter,
Yeah.
and that's worth noting for sure. I think the other big thing, because there wasn't much, and if we want to talk about another specific player, we can go back to it. But the negotiation at the
Yeah.
immunity challenge today was very, very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I'll say first of all, I was surprised Jeff was okay with his precious shot in the darks getting pulled out of the game so quickly. But he did. He let that go. He thought that was a valid
No, I think
counter.
I think Jeff loves that because he's patting himself on the back like, wow, I gave them something else to, turn meta. Like they found
That's
like,
so
wow,
creative.
like they wouldn't have been able to do this without my twist. They found a way to make this twist valuable,
What a
because
unique
now,
use.
well, that's it. Like the shot in the dark is useless.
Yeah.
Now this is twice this season people have found to bring use to it other than its actual purpose.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'm sure I honestly think he loved it. I really do.
The shot in the dark, as useless as it seems, it does add in the aspect of like you have to pay attention to like you have to make sure people aren't going to play it. So it brings more blind sides, and I love that aspect of it. And so that's one thing that I'm nervous that we might miss the rest of the season is they'll be a lot more comfortable, but maybe then those idols will get played and we'll get to see some of that. So that's what I'm hopeful for going forward. But
Yeah.
there was a part of me that I wondered if he regretted making that decision because it takes away that element of the game and takes away, just the option of it.
Yeah, I mean it's certainly going to change gameplay slightly moving forward. I wouldn't say a lot, but I think especially like for those people, like I thought Sam was valid and like, hey, I don't know if I want to do this. Like, yeah, you all are sitting safe, but like, I don't know. So I think for some people it was probably more worth it than others,
Mm-hmm.
and I think I don't know. But then like I think we see it used so little that it's hard to even
Mm-hmm.
know like there's a high chance it wouldn't have been used at all the rest of the season. Like there's a
Yeah.
very good chance. I don't know if it was used at all last season. Is that true? I feel like that might be true. And I know even for this season there were questions I saw online of people like, is the shot in the dark gone? Because there was the first like 3 episodes that it wasn't even mentioned. So
Yeah,
I
they
don't
kind of
know.
operate as if it's like a built-in reason or a built-in thing.
Yeah. So I don't. I thought it was good on their part, and probably better for them than it is not because it is just such a risky thing. And I thought Gabe did have a valid point, even though he did kind of bully Sam into getting rid of it. But like, it's like your vote is more valuable than this 1 in 6 shot. I do agree with that, especially as the numbers get lower.
Mm-hmm.
I honestly think like the only way it's super valuable is if you use it in a way that Rachel did. I think like if you're going home, chances are your vote could be a deciding factor more so than the actual shot in the dark itself.
Mm-hmm. But then there's always the scenario that you find yourself in a position like Kyle shouldn't have been as willing to get rid of his as he was, because if he loses immunity and he's the main target, no one's going to want to side with him. And so that's the point where it's like, Man, I'm probably going because I've played the game poorly up until this point, but I have this last shot in the dark, literally, to potentially save myself. So there's people that I'm
Mhm.
surprised didn't hold on to it for longer. Like when I did the Survivor with my buddies, if I had a shot in the dark, I for sure would have played at that last tribal that I got voted out because I knew that everybody was against me and there wasn't anything I could do. At
Mhm.
least not the way I played it. And so like as a last ditch effort, it's valuable, but I don't know. The game is so fluctuates so much that maybe they still have a chance. I do think it was
Yeah.
ironic that Gabe went out after convincing Sam to give it up.
I will say I was pretty sure that was gonna happen because that happened, and then also when he lost the reward challenge, there was a very
Mhm.
specific zoom in on him disappointed, and that's when I kind of knew. That was my prediction at
Yeah.
that point.
Yep. Sometimes you can tell just by the long lingering shots, like, oh no, he's out of here.
I thought I saw a really funny tweet. I think it was from Steven Fishback. I'm not gonna remember the exact wording of it. And maybe he didn't even say it, so I could be wrong. But it was something about like it's a bummer that there aren't more people on the season wearing glasses because how else will we know who's going to fire without the reflection? I thought
That's
that was very
true.
funny.
That's very true. Seeing like the fire in their eyes, man, how will they know how to vote for?
Was that Gabler? Was that the season where you called it early on and everyone was talking about that? I think
No,
it might have
was
been.
it?
Or was
Might
it
have been
Jesse?
Gabler.
It was one of those two where there was like and it was so obvious that like the whole internet had it pegged like the entire season
Yeah,
that they were
yeah.
going to fire.
Oh, who was it? It
So
might
it's
have.
a
I think it.
it's a real thing. I mean, like the editors try to shove these things in sometimes to like subtly plant things in our mind to make
I
us
want
feel
to
like
say it
it's
was
full
Kenzie.
circle. Was it? Oh well, Kenzie kept talking about like this. Well, no. That was Maria who said that it has a fire inside of her.
Yeah, maybe
So
that's
that's
what I'm
why
confusing.
that's why Kenzie won the game over Charlie because she just has this fire inside of her. Like, no, she built fire.
Naturally.
That's what you're seeing.
Yeah, she actually built it. I'm
That's
trying
what
to
you're
just
noticing.
remember. Let's see
Uh,
who won each season. Who won season 44? Jam.
that one, yeah.
It must have been Gabler. It must have been Gabler.
Unrelated to this season, but I was playing a Sporkle the other night of
Oh yeah.
it was all the photos of the new era people. And you had to it would tell you a name and then you had to click on the photo, but it was all the
Oh.
people from the past 6 seasons. And it was
That's
fun.
awesome.
So I know how much we love to just name Survivor contestants on this podcast. It's just so entertaining for everyone.
Oh, everybody loves it. That's their favorite game.
It is worth noting, because Gabe went home. I do want to pull up our draft just to update where we're at with it. So Gabe was on my list of our draft for the season. So he is the first one on my list that went home. And you have, so I still have Teeny, Andy, and Sue, and you have Sam. So I didn't
I'm
crunch the
perfectly comfortable.
numbers, but I think I'm still in the lead as of now. I wanted to bring that up just because I did have someone who went home last night, so that was a little bit of a bummer. Yeah,
Darn.
I didn't know if you
Boo
wanted to add on to that or if there's
you.
anything else worth mentioning. I thought I should update everyone where the
14
points are.
seasons, 2 pals, 1 podcast.
Oh, are we ending this right now? Huh?
Just hang up.
You're logging off.
I thought
yeah,
about it.
I don't know. Thoughts or is that it?
I'm proud of you. I wish that I was so obsessed with something so meaningless.
If I don't mention it, people are gonna write in. Okay, you got to talk
That's
about
true.
it.
That's true. We do. Yeah, we do have that.
Is there anything else in this episode?
I
need to
think
mention?
I think it's important that we discuss the finale for this season, Nathan.
I don't want to talk about that. What do you want me to
So for
say?
context, a friend of our coworker Nick sent it right originally, and they're breaking out the finale into 2 weeks, 2 hours each week. And Nathan's response was once again Survivor reinventing the meaning of words.
What do you want me to say? Do you want me to get into my semantics rant again? Like, I don't.
Yeah, I do. It's really funny. Finale means last. You can't have two finales, two parts of a finale. So good.
There. Yeah, like what? Why? I don't understand. And they're making
And
it shorter too, because the actual finale, like the second part of the finale, is only 2 hours, right? So
Yeah.
typically the finale is 3 hours. So all they're doing is adding another episode. They're extending the weeks. That's it. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yep.
don't care. I don't care. It'll give
You
us
shouldn't.
another week to talk about stuff, I suppose. So that's cool. Like, instead of having what 5 people to discuss their games, we'll have 4. I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. It'll be something
cares?
like that.
Like this
Just-
matters so little. This makes absolutely no difference at all. Why would anyone want that? Why would you say, "Oh, you want to see the finale of Survivor? Okay, how about over the span of 2 weeks?" Like, who wants that?
This is all I had hoped for. This rant is just a treat. It's just life to my soul.
I'm glad. Just I don't know. You can't do this. You can't do this.
They're doing it.
This all started in Survivor 41, where the winners of the immunity challenge actually lost. And Jeff said, "Oh, just kidding. You know how you won? Well, in this new era, everything's backwards. So you're all up for grabs now." And
I'm with you. That was a big time miss.
ever since, Jeff has been so desperate to mix it up that he will do literally anything to come up with a new twist. And the twists aren't twists. They're not.
If you're gonna find a way to do it, just like changing the meanings of words is the way to do it. Like that's a pretty clever way to go about it.
Sure. Whatever. I don't care. Call it whatever you want, but it's not the finale. I'm not saying, like... Well, I think... I can't remember Nick's exact response, but I think he said something like this... What do you say? Like, it's going to be like a 5-10 part finale or something? Like, this whole season
Yep.
is like... That's... I mean, like, why not extend it for the week before and say a 3-part finale? Why not say the 4... Like, what is this?
It's been a 14-part finale since episode
That's
1.
all it is. That's all it
Yeah.
is. Okay. You happy? I'm done.
I'm happy.
I'm out of energy. Okay. Can we wrap this up? I need to cool down.
Let's wrap it up.
All right. For more episodes, visit notgameoutpersonal.com. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, YouTube at NGABpod. That's at NGABpod. We're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere you listen to podcasts, really. I'm Nathan. This is Tony. We will see you next week.
14 seasons, 2 pals, 1 podcast.